The Narcissist Hunting Grounds, The Therapist, Part 2. Hello, I'm HG Tudor. I've explained in Part 1 a variety of reasons why a narcissist is attracted to the environment of therapy. One other aspect that comes from this is the adoption or creation of concepts and theories by a therapist, which then enables that therapist to utilize that theory, that proposition, that hypothesis in the pursuit of the prime aims. It enables them to wield that theory in a particular way so as to assert control over people, to draw fuel by way of their reactions, to make them seem important, which is a residual benefit with regard to their facade management. By being the proponent of a particular theory, either the originator of it, or someone who has taken some existing theory and has adapted and built upon it, or has caused it to enter the mainstream, this is like the godlike powers that the narcissist believes that they have. Often, this is done within the justice system, sometimes in relation to criminal justice, in relation to domestic violence, in relation to divorce proceedings or child custody, whereby a particular therapist provides an opinion, provides evidence which affects the outcome by the application of some kind of doctrine or principle. No matter how ill-conceived or how ill-applied that principle might be, they push it so that, as seen as a perceived expert, they hoodwink judges, operators within the judicial system, with the consequence that they're able to wield considerable power over the outcomes for various people, resulting in problems for them. It is often the case that, in effect, the therapist is simply propagating pseudoscience, which can have the consequence of affecting victims adversely as a consequence of the narcissist's absence of emotional empathy and the narcissist therapist's pursuit of the prime aims. An article by something called The Skeptic touches upon this, explaining victims of domestic violence often take their time seeking justice. They fear their aggressors. They are ashamed. And they are afraid of being treated unfairly by the courts. In Brazil, a survey carried out by request of the Sao Paulo Association of Justices lists the main reasons why someone would choose not to report domestic violence. Bear in mind that many perpetrators of domestic violence are narcissists. The reasons for not choosing to report it include fear, 73% of the respondents, shame and fear of exposure, 31%, financial dependence on the aggressor, 19%, and skepticism of the law and judicial system, 15%. Those are common reasons, amongst others, that when I have consulted with people as to why they have remained with an individual they suspect as a narcissist, are reasons that are advanced that have prevented them from applying no contact. Now, picture a hypothetical victim of domestic abuse. After overcoming all of these obstacles, he or she finally decides to report the aggressor. He or she seeks justice, be it punishment for the perpetrator, protection for children, a fair divorce, or child maintenance payments. At this point, the victim sees themselves being forced to relive their trauma, and may even be coerced into asking the person who hurt them, or their children, to forgive them. This is something that can happen in a session of what is known as family constellation. This is Brazil's judicial system's pet pseudoscience, implemented with the excuse of helping conflict resolution. Absurd as it may sound, this has been going on in Brazil since 2012. Whilst this article focuses on what is being propagated in relation to family constellation, there are variations of this theme advanced by certain therapists around the world in other jurisdictions which are equally problematic. Family constellation, ostensibly a form of psychotherapy, uses quantum gibberish to push an ideology of male dominance and female servile submission that seems to hark back to the Middle Ages. This therapy was created in the 1970s by a former German Catholic priest called Bert Hellinger. It's described in Hellinger's book, Love's Hidden Symmetry, which was published in 1993. The technique came to Brazil in 1999 and was implemented by the judicial system in 2012, and then was brought into the public healthcare system in 2018 as part of the National Plan for Integrative and Complementary Medicine. In effect, therapy advanced this particular approach. In a typical Constellation session, volunteers take on the roles of family members of the patient. And according to Hellinger, fields of energy, like Rupert Sheldrake's morphogenetic fields, will telepathically make the volunteers behave in a certain way that will bring about repressed memories and unconscious connections of the patient's relatives and their ancestors. This repressed or hidden content will manifest itself in the geometry of the people in the room, their places and stances relative to each other, and this map or constellation, and here's the kicker, duly interpreted by a professional constellator, i.e. the therapist, can heal the patient from mental suffering and or re-establish the family's harmony. Or that's what Hellinger and his successors say. According to the doctrine, the key to the proper reading of the constellation is the purported fact that everyone has a role to play in a family, and this role must be respected. Now, naturally, the narcissist does not have a role to play in a family, but this mindset, propagated by certain therapists, provides a gateway for the narcissist to remain involved. When people overstep or deny their roles, the harmony of the family becomes imbalanced, and this can lead to disease, aggression, assault, incest, and violence. The ideal or healthy scheme is highly hierarchical, with the father at the very top. In his book, Hellinger says that the role of the woman is to follow her husband in language, family, and culture, and the children should do the same. Propagating such a mindset, of course, is ideal for a narcissist who, where the narcissist is male, is able to point to this theory and say, "This is what is said. You need to follow this." This, of course, affords the narcissist the notion of control and paints the female, who does not go along with it, as problematic, thus opening her up to criticism within the judicial process and from therapists. For instance, in a case of incest, where the father sexually abuses the daughter, Hellinger explained that it happens because the mother is probably not fulfilling her marital obligations, blame shifting. Since the father is being neglected, according to Hellinger, it is only natural that the daughter will offer herself as a substitute. Hellinger states, "Now about incest. If you are confronted with cases of incest, a very common dynamic is that the wife withdraws from her husband. She refuses a sexual relationship. Then, as a kind of compensation, a daughter takes her place. This is an unconscious movement, not a conscious one. But you see, with incest, there are two perpetrators, one in the background and one in the open. You cannot resolve that unless this hidden perpetrator is brought in. There are very strange sentences that come to light. The daughter can tell her mother, 'I do it for you,' and she can tell her father, 'I do it for mother.' Homosexuality is also curable, according to Hellinger, who believes it usually occurs when a boy takes the place of a deceased female sibling. In another book, Acknowledging What Is Conversations with Bert Hellinger, the guru of family constellation says that victims of sexual abuse that eventually become prostitutes do so because of an unconscious love for the perpetrator, blame shifting, and for carrying his guilt. In Brazil, this therapy reached a whole new level in the form of systemic law, a concept created and patented by Judge Sammy Storch. Judge Storch promotes the use of family constellation therapy as a type of conflict resolution. He claims that the judicial system's goal should encompass the harmony and love among human relations, and not just distributing justice and enforcing the law. Several women came forward to report the use of this practice in family law issues, such as divorce, alimony, and domestic violence cases. Some were encouraged to ask their abusers for forgiveness. Others were forced to face their abusers and relive their traumas. Storch also sells online courses for anyone interested in becoming a professional constellator. For roughly £350, you can enroll in a 14-hour online course and receive your certificate. In comparison, to earn a bachelor's degree from a psychology school in Brazil, the Ministry of Education demands at least 3,600 hours of classes, as well as supervised internship and research project. Because of the work done by the Institution Question of Science in Brazil, family constellation was exposed as pseudoscience, both in the healthcare system and in the judicial system. Once in the public debate, this therapy became the subject of a public hearing at the Senate. Senator Eduardo Girão summoned specialists in the field, including Bert Hellinger's widow, Sophie Hellinger, and Judge Storch, to highlight the wonders of the technique. Girão says he didn't think it necessary to summon any other professionals in the field of psychology or law that might oppose the idea of family constellation, because he truly believed that nobody could oppose such a marvel. Thanks to the intervention of another senator, Sergio Petachou, IQC was called, together with a team of scientists. The hearing alternated between a laundry list of all the typical logical fallacies, cherry-picked positive testimony, appeals to tolerance and open-mindedness, to paper over the absence of evidence and the very real dangers of the practice, and the no-nonsense deposition of psychologists, physicists, and even legal scholars. As things stand, family constellation is still an accepted mode of conflict resolution in Brazil. Its use by the courts authorized by the National Council of Justice, the ethics overseer of the judiciary system. Formally, the Brazilian law for the protection of women forbids the use of any conflict resolution mechanisms in the case of domestic violence. Such cases ought to be treated as criminal cases, full stop. This would then restrict the application of this therapy of family constellation to matters of alimony, child custody, divorce, and the like. But that's not what happens. The conservative cultural habit of appealing to the woman to forgive in order to save the relationship no matter what is still strong in Brazil. And many judges see themselves as Solomonic dispensers of wisdom, rather than public servants in charge of applying the law. In this scenario, family constellation is almost irresistible. And of course, it won't take much by way of understanding how this form of therapy, advanced by certain therapists, appeals to narcissists, that the propagation of this idea is manna from heaven for an abuser. Even in non-violent cases, however, the adoption of pseudoscientific, borderline mystical concepts and practices, including mental communication with ancestors, as tools for the court would be troubling. The use of such concepts and practices to push women into accepting a sexist framework to deal with their family problems is unacceptable. Paulo Almeida, neuroscientist, lawyer, and director of the IQC, said at the Senate hearing that the Brazilian state is highly permeable to pseudosciences. Lobbies with access to special advisory committees, lawmakers, and even individual high-position bureaucrats have little difficulty in finding ways to circumvent the scrutiny of regulatory, science-orientated agencies like Anvisa, which is the Brazilian version of the FDA, and have their products or beliefs enshrined in some form of public policy. As you know, this would also attract narcissists. The ability to impose their views, their godlike approach, their guru-like status on others is something that appeals for the pursuit of the prime aims, and having a framework that facilitates that makes it all the more attractive for narcissists to be drawn to this particular area and to propagate such a therapy as this concept of family constellation. This is especially true in the case of systems of belief that have a spiritualist flavour. Family constellation, however, brings dangers that surpass the mere misapplication of public funds and the eventual threat to the health of people who choose to forego science-based treatments. It's something that affects the lives and minds of very vulnerable people, reopening wounds and piling trauma over trauma. Thus, the therapist is attracted to this field for the purpose of creating a concept, a supposed way of conflict resolution, which can then be implemented. They are the god of conflict resolution. They are solving problems for people. And it's no wonder that ridiculous magical thinking as that of family constellation finds its birthplace in the mind of a narcissist, and then other narcissists utilize it, which then go on to actually facilitate the continuance of narcissistic abuse. I'm HG Tudor. Thank you for listening.